October 4th, 1982. Frank Lefty. Rosenthal steps out of Tony Roma's with a bag of takeout. He slides into his 1981 Cadillac Eldorado, turns the ignition, and flames begin curling from the defroster vent. Then the car explodes. The man who secretly ran Las Vegas for the mob, overseeing 4 casinos and millions in skimmed cash without ever holding a gaming license, survived, saved by a metal plate beneath the driver's seat. Nobody was ever charged, and the list of people who wanted him dead stretched across the entire Midwest. Frank Lawrence Rosenthal was born on June 12, 1929, on Chicago's West Side, in a neighborhood where gambling was as common as baseball. From the start, he absorbed the rhythms of risk. His father, a horse owner with a taste for the track, introduced him to the world of odds and wagers before most kids had learned long division. By grade school, Rosenthal was already placing parlay card bets, small-time action for pocket change, but the beginning of an obsession. Wrigley Field became his classroom. In the bleachers, he watched not just the Cubs, but the men who traded slips and whispers, bookies who could turn a double play into a payday. He studied the numbers, memorized the patterns, and learned how to read people as well as box scores. By his teens, he was more than a spectator. He was setting odds for local bookmakers, men tied to the Chicago outfit, who saw in him a mind that could turn statistics into profit. Rosenthal's reputation grew quickly. He had an instinct for the edge, a feel for the intangible details that decided games and races. In a city where the line between legal and illegal was drawn in pencil, his skill made him valuable. By age 19, he was working directly for bookmakers connected to the outfit, calculating spreads, managing risk, and building a name as a young man who never lost his cool. His rise wasn't fueled by luck. It was built on relentless calculation, a gambler's patience, and a willingness to outwork everyone else. The streets of Chicago taught him that information was currency and that trust was a commodity even scarcer than a winning ticket. In those early years, Rosenthal became indispensable, the oddsman who could see past the noise, the kid who turned a neighborhood hustle into the first step toward controlling millions. Before Las Vegas, before the skimming and the car bomb, it was the bleachers and the back rooms of Chicago that shaped Frank Rosenthal. He learned the business from the ground up, and by the time he left for bigger things, the city's bookmakers knew. Lefty had the kind of mind you couldn't buy, and the kind of nerve you couldn't teach. By the late 1950s, Frank Rosenthal's reputation had outgrown Chicago's backrooms. His knack for reading odds and his cool under pressure caught the attention of national sports writers, who began to treat him as something more than a local prodigy. In an era when most bookmakers operated in the shadows, Rosenthal's name started appearing in the pages of major magazines. Sports Illustrated, the gold standard of sports journalism, described him as one of America's greatest living experts on sports gambling, a rare public nod for a man whose world thrived on secrecy. The press painted him as a gambling genius, a figure who could calculate the outcome of a ball game with the same precision as a mathematician working a proof. His picks were followed by bettors from coast to coast, and his advice moved betting lines in cities he had never set foot in. Newspapers and magazines reported that Rosenthal's salary as a professional handicapper reached into the hundreds of thousands, a staggering sum for the time, especially for someone who never took a legal wager. FBI records would later note an annual salary of $30,000 in the early 1970s just for his work at the Rose Bowl Sportsbook. But the real figure, once he reached the top of his game, climbed far higher. By the time he was managing national betting services, estimates placed his annual take at $250,000, all without a single gaming license or official title. With every profile, Rosenthal's credibility grew. Sports journalists described his uncanny ability to spot a fix, his photographic memory for statistics, and his near obsession with the details that separated winners from losers. He was quoted as saying he could smell a crooked line before the ink dried, and for years his word was gospel among professional gamblers. His public image, part mathematician, part streetwise hustler, became a magnet for investors, including those from the underworld who saw the value in a man who could turn information into profit. National attention brought both opportunity and risk. The spotlight legitimized Rosenthal's skill, but it also drew the gaze of law enforcement and rival bookmakers. In the world of professional gambling, visibility was a double-edged sword. For Frank Rosenthal, the acclaim of the press set the stage for a new kind of scrutiny and a future where every win would come with a cost. On March 20th, 1963, Frank Rosenthal stepped into a federal courtroom in North Carolina and entered a plea that would follow him for the rest of his life. He stood accused of bribing a college basketball player to fix the outcome of a game. The charge was serious, sports bribery and a federal offense, but Rosenthal did not fight it. He pleaded no contest, avoiding a drawn-out trial and the risk of a lengthy sentence. The plea was a calculated move, the act of a man who understood that in his world, silence and survival often went hand in hand. The conviction never sent him to prison, but it left a permanent mark on his record, one that would haunt every attempt he made to go legitimate. The legal pressure did not ease. By September 8, 1961, Rosenthal was called before the United States Senate's Select Committee on Improper Activities in the Labor or Management Field, a televised spectacle chaired by Senator John McClellan. The committee wanted answers about match fixing, mob ties, and the hidden structure of gambling in America. Rosenthal gave them nothing. He invoked the Fifth Amendment 38 times, refusing to answer even the most basic questions. When asked if he was left-handed, he replied that he respectfully invoked his constitutional privilege under the Fifth Amendment. The hearing became infamous, a public demonstration of the limits of government power against organized silence. Senators grew visibly frustrated as Rosenthal stonewalled, his face unreadable, his composure unbroken. The spectacle did not end in the hearing room. Newspapers ran photos of Rosenthal, jaw set, flanked by attorneys. Headlines described him as the man who would not talk, the gambler who played the law like a high-stakes table. FBI agents took notes. Federal prosecutors opened new files. The scrutiny only intensified, and every move Rosenthal made was shadowed by surveillance and suspicion. He became a case study in defiance, a symbol of the mob's ability to outmaneuver the law by refusing to play by its rules. For Rosenthal, the mounting legal heat in Chicago and Miami was more than an inconvenience. It was a threat to his freedom and his future. The plea, the hearings, and the relentless government attention made one thing clear: the old ways were closing in. If he wanted to keep working, he needed a new city, a new game, and a place where the rules could be bent by those with the nerve to try. Las Vegas, with its neon promise and its appetite for risk, was waiting. Pressure in Miami reached a breaking point by the late 1960s. Surveillance teams tracked Rosenthal's movements day and night. Federal agents built a dossier that ran to hundreds of pages, logging every meeting, every phone call, every rumor of violence tied to the bookie wars. Miami's underworld had erupted in a series of bombings, businesses torched, cars left smoldering in driveways, rivals disappearing without a trace. Rosenthal's name surfaced in grand jury rooms and police reports, but each time he slipped away. When called to testify about the bombings, he invoked the Fifth Amendment. Not a word about the outfit, not a hint of cooperation. The city was no longer safe. The FBI file on Rosenthal grew thicker with each month. Agents noted his connections to Chicago, his suspected role in fixing games, and his uncanny ability to stay one step ahead of indictments. The pressure wasn't just legal, it was existential. Every day brought fresh threats, from law enforcement and from those inside the business who saw him as a liability. In this climate, Survival meant disappearing before the next subpoena or the next car bomb. In 1968, Rosenthal made his move. He packed up and left Miami behind, heading west for Las Vegas. The city was built on risk, run by men who understood the value of silence and the price of loyalty. Las Vegas offered something Miami and Chicago could not. A place where the rules could be bent, where a man with the right connections and the right instincts could operate just below the radar. The outfit's reach had already stretched into the desert, but Las Vegas was still a frontier, a city growing faster than regulators could keep up, a place where fortunes were made in the shadows of neon. Rosenthal arrived with more than just a gambler's reputation. He brought the lessons of Chicago's backrooms and Miami's war zones, and a mind sharpened by years of dodging the law. The FBI surveillance didn't end, but in Las Vegas, the game was different. Here, he could build something bigger and more lucrative than anything he'd left behind. The move west was not an escape. It was a calculated advance. For Rosenthal, Las Vegas was the next table, and he intended to play for the highest stakes. In 1976, Frank Rosenthal entered a room where the odds were stacked against him for once. The Nevada Gaming Control Board had summoned him to answer for the empire he ran from the shadows, a man who managed 4 of the city's biggest casinos without ever holding a gaming license. At the head of the panel sat Harry Reid, a young but unyielding chairman who would one day become a national political force. On this day, he was Rosenthal's chief adversary, determined to expose the hidden hand guiding Las Vegas's most lucrative tables. The hearing unfolded with the formality of a trial. Rosenthal, immaculately dressed and unflinching, faced questions not just about his qualifications, but about the company he kept. Regulators pressed him on his long-standing ties to men like Tony Spilotro, the outfit's enforcer in Las Vegas, and on the trail of arrests and investigations that followed him from Chicago to Miami and now to Nevada. Each answer was measured, each denial precise. When asked about his association with known criminals, Rosenthal insisted he was merely an innovator, a consultant who brought modern sports betting and new efficiencies to the casino floor. But the board had already seen the FBI files, the Senate testimony, and the no-contest plea that still lingered on his record. Harry Reid's questions cut deeper. He challenged Rosenthal's explanations, pointing to the pattern of aliases, the shifting job titles, and the fact that no one could recall a day when Rosenthal wasn't in charge. The room was tense, the stakes unmistakable. This was not just a battle for a license, but a confrontation between the old order and a new breed of regulator determined to clean up the strip. The board's decision came down hard. In a unanimous vote, Rosenthal's application was denied. The language was blunt. He was deemed a person of poor repute, unfit to be trusted with the privileges of Nevada gaming. Rosenthal appealed, taking his case to district court and then to the state Supreme Court. Each time, the answer was the same. Every door closed. The message from the state was unmistakable. No amount of innovation or influence could outweigh a lifetime spent skirting the law. The defeat was public and humiliating. Newspapers ran headlines about the man who ran Las Vegas without a license and now couldn't get one no matter how hard he tried. For the outfit, the denial was more than an embarrassment. It threatened the flow of millions and put a spotlight on a system built on secrecy. The legal wall erected by the Gaming Control Board did more than block Rosenthal's ambitions. It forced the conflict out of the courtroom and into the shadows, where old alliances began to fray. This channel covers the real stories behind Las Vegas, the mob insiders, the crimes that were never solved, and the people who were never supposed to be found. Hit subscribe. New videos 3 times a week. Rosenthal's refusal to stay in the shadows became its own kind of provocation. By the late 1970s, he was no longer content to rule from back offices. Every week, his face appeared on television screens across Las Vegas, hosting the Frank Rosenthal Show live from the Stardust. The lineup was pure spectacle. Sinatra, Bob Hope, Wayne Newton. Even O.J. Simpson, drawn not just by the lights, but by Rosenthal's reach. Between celebrity interviews and lounge acts, he used the platform to air grievances against Nevada regulators and law enforcement, calling out the Gaming Control Board by name, mocking their investigations, and ridiculing the very system that had denied him a license. His on-air barbs were more than entertainment. They were a public dare to the men who ran the city's power structure from the shadows. In back rooms far from the stage, his act was being watched with growing alarm. FBI wiretaps in Kansas City caught mob bosses fuming over Rosenthal's grandstanding. In one recorded call, they called him crazy, questioning whether he was still loyal or just reckless enough to bring the whole operation down. The anger was not confined to Kansas City. In Milwaukee, Frank Balistrieri, known as the Mad Bomber, was caught on tape vowing to have full satisfaction for the problems Rosenthal's mouth and methods were causing. The outfit had always preferred men who kept quiet, who understood that visibility was risk. Rosenthal's public persona, combined with his refusal to back down, made him a liability. The danger was not just professional. By 1981, the FBI and Nevada investigators had begun to suspect that the real threat to Rosenthal might come from inside his own circle. The relationship between Rosenthal and Tony Spilotro, the Chicago enforcer sent to protect the outfit's interests in Vegas, had frayed past the breaking point. Spilotro's affair with Rosenthal's wife, Jerry, was no longer rumor but documented fact. A betrayal that left both men exposed and unpredictable. The personal and the professional had collided in a city where such collisions were rarely survivable. The wiretaps, the threats, the affair, all of it pointed toward a gathering storm. Rosenthal had made himself the most public face of a criminal empire that depended on secrecy. The men who once relied on his mind for profit now saw him as a problem to be solved. In the months before the explosion, the tension reached a pitch that could not be ignored. Every phone call recorded, every whispered threat, every on-air insult set the stage for violence that no one would claim and no one would solve. Power shifted in Las Vegas, but no one ever faced charges for the car bomb that nearly killed Rosenthal. The city he helped shape now buries its mob scars beneath neon and spectacle, yet the silence endures. In a world where power hides behind closed doors, the cost of survival remains measured in secrets. The next chapter is Tony Spilotro. This channel covers the real stories. Hit subscribe. New videos 3 times a week.